Good morning. We're now going to wrap up the very first chapter of the Sefer Yetzirah, the ancient book of creation, the oldest existing book of Jewish mysticism. So we're going to cover the last verse, verse 14. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay, and there we are. Sefer Yetzirah 1:14. And I'll read first the late Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's translation of the Hebrew, and then mine. So, these are the 10 sefirot of nothingness, the breath of the living God, breath from breath, water from breath, fire from water, up, down, east, west, north, south. Okay, and then we have my translation. These are the 10 sefirot, declarations of constraint, spirit breath of the living Elohim, one of our Hebrew words for God. Spirit breath from spirit breath, water from spirit breath, fire from water, ascent, beneath, east and west, north and south. Okay, let's see if we can explain this a bit. In this passage, we get a sense of the original meaning of the word sefirot. They are declarations that define our three-dimensional space. Again, it says in rabbinic literature that God created the world with 10 utterances. These correspond to the actually 9 times in Genesis in the Hebrew that says, and God said, but then the very first verse in the beginning, that is also counted as a creative utterance, so that we get 10 utterances. And the sefirot, they represent these 10 utterances as declarations of constraint, declarations that separate things and set up boundaries. Okay, now let me continue here. The letter Aleph corresponds to spirit breath. Remember that in Hebrew, the word for spirit is the same as the word for breath, so I'm using both translations here. The letter Mem corresponds to water, and the letter Shin to fire. Soon we will also talk about the 7 double letters. 7 letters in Hebrew that can take on either a hard or soft sound. These are the letters Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Kaf, Pei, Resh, and Tav. And a later passage will identify these letters as corresponding to up, down, east, west, north, south, and center. The letter Tav, which is the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet, corresponds to center. But in our passage above, it also represents breath from breath. Okay, so interesting things happening here. We have these 10 utterances or declarations that create the universe. These utterances also, as we have seen, they correspond to 3 spatial axes. The up-down axis, the east-west axis, the north-south axis that define 3-dimensional space. They correspond to 6 spatial directions, and those spatial directions that we defined in the previous passage are going to correspond to these letters, Bet through Tav, with Tav corresponding to the very center of this cube of space that's being defined. And then that very center also, it's really the same as the spirit which created everything, since it's spirit from spirit, breath from breath. It's to serve the infinite contracted down to a single point. Okay? So we're seeing this correspondence between declarations, directions and things used to define this cube of space, which is a very early model for the universe, and then also a correspondence with letters. These three, what we call the mother letters, and the 7 double letters. And these are what the sefirot really are, these three things. At least this is what they were originally. Okay. Recall also the earlier passage that said that the end is contained in the beginning, and the beginning in the end. Likewise, with the first letter of the alphabet in Hebrew, Aleph represents air or breath, and the last letter of the alphabet, Tav, represents breath from breath. Ultimately, the beginning and the end are inseparable from one another and are one and the same. Again, it is only the mind that creates the false distinction between the two. It's only our minds that create all this separation. Aleph is breath, Tav is breath, breath from breath. It's like water from water, it's all the same. It's all water or all breath. So there's no real separation. Okay, and continuing here. And lastly, we also see in this verse that the 10 sefirot are none other than the 10 letters from the alphabet. The 3 mother letters plus the 7 doubles that we'll discuss soon. And I add to that there are these 10 letters from the alphabet. There are these spatial axes and directions in the center that define the cube of space. And they are 10 utterances, 10 declarations that created our world, our universe. Okay, last sentence. Of course, in later Kabbalah, the sefirot were divorced from the letters and given entirely new meanings. Those new meanings, as we'll see, they illuminate additional aspects of the sefirot, but if we don't know where all this came from, then we lose the beginning. We lose the original understanding. And we really need both. We need the understandings that everything began with, and only then can we fully comprehend some of the later interpretations or understandings of these things. Okay, well, that's it for the first chapter of the Sefer Yetzirah. That's it for this verse. I'll stop sharing. And I wish you all a good day, a good week, and lots of shalom in your life. Lots of peace and lots of holiness. Wholeness and holiness. Spell those differently, but there's definitely a connection there. May you have both. Okay, I hope to see you next time.